David Price will have his first fight since the devastating knockout loss that he suffered at the hands of drug cheat Erkan Tepa nearly a year ago. He will have his first fight back on the undercard of the Tony Bellew Ilunga Makabu fight this Sunday. That's right, this Sunday, not Saturday, Sunday. It's bank holiday weekend in the UK, and therefore a Sunday is a viable option to put on a big sporting event in this instance. So Price will be fighting on the Bellew Makabu undercard. He was originally supposed to be facing some journeyman, some easy knockover job, but apparently Eddie Hearn wasn't happy with that opponent. They wanted a more legitimate test for David Price. So they've found a guy from the Czech Republic called Vaclav Pejsar. Now, I'm sure I'm butchering that name. I'm obviously not a Czech speaker, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But I've looked at this Pejsar guy's record. I've watched a couple of his fights on YouTube now. And I have to say, I'm surprised that they're putting David Price in with this guy for his comeback fight. This is a potential banana skin for David Price. Price is somebody who's always lacked mental strength. Now, perhaps the process he's going through right now might strengthen him mentally. But up until now, he's always lacked mental strength. He's coming off a devastating knockout loss where he was totally obliterated in 2 rounds and a long layoff. So to put a fighter like him, as mentally fragile and as physically fragile around his chin as he is, to put him in with someone like Pejsar, is it wise? Is Eddie Hearn trying to get him beat? Is Eddie Hearn trying to eliminate a potential threat for Joshua? Some people are going to laugh at that. I'm not saying that Price is a potential threat for Joshua. I'm saying maybe Eddie Hearn sees Price as a potential threat for Joshua. David Price did apparently, and many people have talked about this, Dave Allen. Say what you like about Dave Allen, but Dave Allen, who has sparred numerous rounds with Joshua, he says that Joshua was knocked spark out in sparring against David Price. It was a long time ago. Joshua was still amateur, but maybe Eddie Hearn has that in his mind. Maybe he thinks, you know what, if I make Price versus Joshua anytime soon, Price has got the power to knock Joshua out. And what does Joshua get by beating Price at this point? He's not going to get any credit. Price has been knocked out several times now and people see him as chinny. So I don't want to make the Price fight until Price gets some serious wins under his belt, builds his brand back up again, and then maybe I'll risk it because the reward, the money will be worth it. Maybe that's what Eddie Hearn is thinking. Or maybe he's just trying to get Price beat. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's giving Price the opportunity to prove himself, or maybe he wants to get him beat. Because as I say, this Pejsar guy, okay, he's 11-2. Yeah, 11 fights, 2 losses. 9 wins, and I believe 8 by KO. Let me just check. Yeah, 9 wins, 8 by KO. So he's only gone the distance once. And those 2 losses were on points. One of them was to an unbeaten German prospect called Tom Schwartz, who is a big puncher, young guy, 6'6", big puncher, in shape. He lost that on points last year. And his other loss was also last year to Andrei Rudenko. That was also on points. So this Pejsar has been in with a couple of guys who can bang a little bit. Certainly that guy Schwartz can bang a bit. And nobody's knocked him out. Nobody's dropped him. And Schwartz has got quite a few knockouts himself. I mean, as I say, he's only been a distance. He's been a distance, I believe, 3 times. But only one of his wins came on points. All of his other wins were by knockout. His last fight was a first-round knockout over a terrible opponent, admittedly. The fight before, a third-round knockout. The fight before that, a second-round knockout. The fight before that was a 6 rounds points win. So the guy does have some type of ability. He is competent. He's 6'4", so he's not a small guy. Not as big as David Price, obviously, but not small. He fights aggressively. He's in shape. So it's interesting that they've picked this guy for David Price. He hasn't really shown that much vulnerability, and he's only 31 years old. He clearly still has a lot of ambition, and he'll be looking at Price like, yep, I'm going to put it on this guy. Interesting that the Sauerlands have allowed this to go ahead. Do they really believe in David Price now? Do they really care about him? Are they selling him down the river? How much are they getting for putting him on? The undercard of Bellew Makabu. It is a Liverpool show. David Price is from Liverpool. So I don't know. You let me know what you think of the situation, people. Is David Price in danger here? Is this too dangerous for his comeback fight? Let me just put this into perspective. David Price is nowhere near as mentally strong as David Haye as a fighter. As a fighter, David Haye is strong mentally. Let's not get it confused, right? For all I've said about him being a liar and a narcissist and all this type of stuff, yeah, David Haye's not mentally weak. Yeah, he's a strong guy mentally. He has a fighter's mentality and a lot of killer instinct in him. And he's a better fighter than David Price. But yet David Price's opponent, I can tell you for certain, is a hell of a lot better than Arnold Jurjai. That I can tell you for certain. I've watched this guy fight. He's a hell of a lot better than Jurjai. And that's who they're putting David Price in with. A guy who's nowhere near as good as David Haye, a guy who's much more mentally vulnerable than David Haye, a guy who, unlike David Haye, is not coming off a knockout win over Chisora. No, he's coming off a devastating knockout loss. Is this wise? I've seen some people who've also looked at this guy, this opponent for David Price, Pejsar, and they've said they're already trying to place bets down and say that David Price is going to get knocked out. It might be a wise bet. I don't know what the odds are on a David Price knockout loss, but if you can get decent odds, he might be worth placing down some money because there's no doubt he's going to be a bit vulnerable. David Price is now working with trainer, what's he called now? I forgot his name, Dave Coldwell, the little short guy. It is pretty amusing if you haven't seen it, watching Dave Coldwell take David Price on the pads. I always liked Dave Coldwell. He's a very jovial character. Always liked him, big up Dave Coldwell. But yeah, he's only about 5'3", 5'4", Dave Coldwell, and Price is like 6'8". So when you see Dave Coldwell, there's a few videos on YouTube. When you see him on the pads with Price, it's comedy. It really is comedy. So we'll see how Price does. I saw Price on the pads, as I say, with Dave Coldwell, and Price didn't look bad. He's still very robotic. He's heavier now than he was before. Apparently, that's what Dave Coldwell says. He says that David Price is like, I think 19 stone now in pounds. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be in pounds. I'm guessing it's going to be 260, 270, something like that. David Price is going to be, whereas before he was in the 240s maybe. So he's going to be a lot heavier for this fight. And Coldwell seems to think that's a good thing. His hand speed, from what I saw in the pads, is still pretty good. David Price never had bad hand speed. It was more his foot speed and his reflexes that were always slow. But his hand speed for a guy of his size is actually pretty good. He delivers his punches fairly well. Doesn't get enough extension on them for my liking. A lot of the time, David Price, tends to kind of throw bent arm shots rather than getting full extension and, reach on his punches a lot of the time. But nevertheless, decent hand speed for a guy of his size, and I was fairly impressed with what he was doing on the pads, even though his body movement and all that was still very stiff and robotic looking. So yeah, let me know what you think of this, people. Have a look at this Pejsar guy on YouTube, and let me know what you think. Do you think it's worth putting some money on him to score an upset knockout victory over David Price? Let me know in the comment section, people. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.